If you've got the new Sony A7RV, you'll notice there's a lot more detail in the menu. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough today and go through some of the settings in a little more detail, like color space and file formats. So let's dive in and take a look. Firstly, we'll just go down the main menu on the left-hand side, starting with My Menu is the star symbol at the top, and then if you drop down, you've got the home screen that gives you a main menu 1 and 2. Now note that I've got this set on the video function at the moment, and so it'll show me all my video settings there. If I have this turned to the photography setting, then all my photographic settings will be there. And as I drop down on the left hand side, the next symbol is the video symbol, and that will give me all my video functions. Again, if I've got this set to camera, it'll give me my camera functions, and we'll look at all that in a minute. Coming down again on the left hand side, we've got exposure and color space, and then we have all the focusing mode. Drop down again, it's the playback. Below that we have all the connectivity settings, and then the suitcase setting is where we can customize the camera and change any main functions like that. Starting at the top, we've got the My Menu. If you click across, you've got anything you've set into the My Menu, and you do that by dropping down to number 2 where it says My Menu Settings, and you click across and it says Add Item, and you can just click there, and then you can search your camera for anything you want to add into that you need quick access to, that perhaps you haven't got in your FN setting or on one of your custom buttons. Dropping down to the home symbol, come across, we've got Main 1 and Main 2. And really this is just the same screen as if you were scrolling down. So if I click over to the right, this tells me what settings I've got the camera on at the moment. And it's a good way, if you can't remember quite what you've programmed in or you've dialed in, this is a good way to check or to remind yourself. So you've got here, for example, I've got my recording frame rate at 50p, the shutter is 100th, ISO, picture profile, all your functions here, and you can click into any of these and make changes right here. So it's a very fast way of accessing all the functions from this one screen. And if you just scroll further down, it will drop into the menu 2, and then I will just turn this to the camera mode, and then when I come across, I've only got one main menu. If you come across into that menu, you'll see all your camera settings for taking photos, and you can click into any of those and make any changes. Coming out of that, I'll just go back to my video function and drop down to the video symbol on the left hand side, and when I come across, I've got image quality, and if I click it over again, we've got file format. If we click on file format, we've then got all the different video recording formats. Now just to quickly go over these, your top one is your HS for 8K and 4K. Even though these are actually smaller file formats, they're very heavy on your processing power. So if you've got a very fast computer and your softwares can cope with that, then it's very high quality, but it obviously is very time consuming and you could be waiting for a lot of rendering time. Most popular is to use the S4K, and that's much lighter on the processing speed. It's what Sony have been using in their previous cameras, so most of you guys out there will be probably used to using that. That's much lighter on the processing speed, and it's still high quality. Not the long GOP compression as the HS, it's the shorter form intra compression, and it's lighter on the computer. Dropping down, we've got the S-I, and again, that's even slightly lighter file to work on. My recommendation is to use the HAVC S 4K file format, and you'll get superb quality out of that, and that's what I use all the time. Dropping down, you've got your movie setting, pop into there to get your recording frame rate. Then you've got your slow motion and your S&Q settings, proxy settings, we won't go into that, and lens compensation. So coming back out of that, we've got your media format, so your recording media slots, so whether you want to record just on slot 1 or to duplicate onto slot 1 and slot 2, or If you're in photographic mode, you might want to put JPEG on one slot and RAW on the other slot. I have them duplicating into both slots, so I've got a backup. And then dropping down, we've got recovery image from the database. So if you've accidentally deleted an image, you can go in there and you can recover the image. And then there's just the display media info. Dropping down, we've got information about the file and how you want to write the serial numbers and file settings. So you can change your naming protocol in here. The shooting mode is quite useful because in here you can use camera set memory, so you can set your camera up for specific shooting purposes, whether it's for video or for photography, and then select in here and save it to one of the memory slots, so memory 1, memory 2, memory 3 for example. So when you're doing that for video, your bottom dial is set to video, and then your top dial you're set to 1, 2 or 3, and it will take it to that memory setting and recall all those memory settings, so your camera is automatically set up to go. So if you're shooting like YouTube videos like this, I have a memory recall set for that, so my settings are always exactly the same. So you might be going on portrait shoots and you'll want to do that, so you'll turn your camera to the photographic mode, set up your camera, and then save it into one of your dials, 1, 2 or 3, so you can just punch that in and you're ready to go. Memory recall media is if you've got multiple cameras, you've set this all up, you can save all those recall functions to a memory slot and import them into another camera, and you do it through this function here. Silent shutter is great for if you're shooting, for example, weddings, or you're in an environment where you don't want anyone to hear the camera, then you can just make that adjustment there. And you've got your release without lens, which I'll put on disabled because I don't want to be taking photos without a lens. Like, I don't want to take a photo if there's no memory card in there. I want the camera to tell me not to take that photo. So if the lens wasn't fitted on exactly correctly, then you don't want to be taking photos. Here we've got anti-flicker set, and then audio recording functions. Obviously I've got audio recording on, and then you can in here change your recording levels. Audio timing, you can change that to being as the camera is already set up, or it'll do it to lip syncing. So it has a little AI function in there where if the camera's recording a bit out of sync for whatever reason, because of external mics that you're using, etc., then that you make a slight adjustment in there. Then you've got wind noise reduction. I'm sure most of you will be using external microphones, and so you probably won't be using a lot of these functions. And then we've got time code settings, and we'll cover all of that in a bit more detail in a different video. Then just to show you, if we turn this to the photographic mode, and you'll see that symbol now has changed to a camera icon instead of a video camera icon. You've then got some slight differences in the menu here with image quality. You've got the JPEG and HEIF, and you can switch over to having that on JPEG or on the HEIF 420 or 422. Really, that's trying to mimic more of a RAW file, so it's giving more dynamic range, so it's giving more dynamic range, so it's not pulling the blacks too much, it's giving a slightly flatter image for you to work with. Personally, I just leave this on JPEG because the file format works with Adobe Suites, Lightroom, etc. But mainly I'll always be shooting in RAW, so it's not really relevant, but occasionally for personal use with the kids, I might just shoot in JPEG because actually the JPEGs that come out of this camera are like crazy good, so it's worth trying. And then you've got here the image quality. Obviously, if you are shooting JPEG, I'd put it on the highest quality, and I'd put it on fine, and you're still out of this camera getting a 60 megabit file, so just bear that in mind, and you can actually have an extra fine. Aspect ratio, just leave it to the standard file format. It will give you your basic video settings, and it will tell you that you've got more control whilst on video mode. Again, same with movie settings. APS-C, just leave it on auto, but if you check out my other videos, I've made a shortcut button on the C2 here that takes me into crop sensor anyway. Long exposure with noise reduction, I would just leave it off because I'm going to be shooting in RAW and I'd rather the camera not doing any setting changes for me, and I just want to work my file in post-production myself. Next, coming over to media would be format of the files, where they're being saved, and the recovery database and display info. All this is similar to the video file. Folders the same, shooting mode is the same, and we've got image stabilization. So whether you want steady shot on or off, and maybe if you've got it on a gimbal, you might not want it on, depending on the lens you're using. Just dropping down to the exposure and color space. Exposure, auto slow shutter, ISO control here, which again in one of my other videos, I've got that set to the dial at the back for quick access, and you can control whether you want it on manual priority, aperture priority, shutter program. And then exposure compensator, and you can have that in third of a stop, or you can change that or adjust the compensation from the menu here. Obviously you've got the dial at the top, so you're probably not going to use that. Metering, this is where you would adjust your metering, but I'm guessing you'll put that like I have into the FN function to have quick access to that, but you'll get to those modes just here. And you can also adjust your face priority and whether you want that on or off, and whether you want spot metering where you'd like that to be. And then we've got the white balance function. At the moment, just got it set to auto, but you can get to all those functions there. Again, I'd recommend having that on a shortcut button, but certainly you'd have it probably in your FM button. And then priority set and auto white balance, I've just got to standard. So then you can have shockless white balance, and that just means when movie recording, and you've got it on auto white balance, how quickly it would change to different white balance setting. Then color tone, this is where the fun happens for video recording. We've got D-range optimizer, creative look, picture profile, and soft skin effect. So D-range optimizer is really for how much depth you get in the blacks and not in the blacks. So you might well want this off if you want to work with a flatter profile, so the camera's not doing any adjustments for you. Creative looks you're probably familiar with. You could put in here whether you want it to be black and white or have some other look, but I'm guessing most of you will probably do that in post-production. Picture profiles then is where all the exciting bit is. If you click into here, this is where you've got, I think it's 11 picture profiles, and you can go from your different logs. So for example, in picture profile 7, you've got S-Log 2, and you can adjust that to S-Log 3, HLG, S-Cinetone, Cine 123, the movie setting, etc. And then you can change the color gamut in here as well. You can put this into S-Cinetone there. Some people might put the gamma as an S-Log 3 to get a nice flat profile, but they like the color space of S-Cinetone, and so in the color mode you'd put S-Cinetone there, and they can work quite well together. S-Cinetone is quite nice as it comes out the camera. Just bear in mind, if you're using S-Log 2, S-Log 3 for example, then you'll be working with LUTs, lookup tables, and so you need to be used to using those. And then you've got soft skin effect. Again, I would probably leave that to post-production. What we will do in another video though is come back to this color space, color tones, and go through some examples of using all of these in more detail. And then zebra display. Again, I've got that in the FM menu because I like to use that on and off. And then dropping down, we've just got our focusing mode and autofocus. You probably will have this again in your function menu, and I've got it in the custom buttons. You can just dive in here, and whether you want it on manual or not. Autofocus transition speed is quite interesting because it's how smoothly you want it to find its focus, whether it's hunting around or whether it snaps onto the focus. Autofocus shift, that's how responsive it will be to focus on and off subjects, and then whether you've got autofocus assist on or not. Focus area again is whether you want the focus to be wide in the center, and spot mode, expand spot, and you can limit the area that it's going to look for that focus area. And the focus area colors can be red or white. And then whether you want the focus point to circulate around the screen or it gets to the edge of the screen and stops, it's whatever your preference is. Autofocus frame is how fast it'll move across the frame. I've just got that left to standard. And then subject recognition, we will be doing another video on all the autofocus and the AI of the face recognition, but just to briefly go through this. Here you can have, obviously, whether it's recognizing subjects or not, target, whether it's human, animal, insect, car, right, left eye selection, subject recognizing from display, we'll cover that again in another video. Face memory here, where you would register a face and whether you're prioritizing that face registration or not. Obviously really handy at weddings and events like that, but we'll come back to that. In here you've got all your focus assist functions, but if you leave those on standard, you won't go far wrong. And peaking display, if that's switched on, it'll just show you what's in focus and what isn't, and you can change the color of the peaking. Then playback mode, and I tend not to worry too much about this. Next, down on the left-hand side, we've got networking, which is the green world symbol, same as the other Sony cameras. And then we've got your connecting with smartphone. And if you come across here, you can register your smartphone and it gives you the instructions here of the details of how to connect your smartphone, the size of images if you're sending images to your smartphone, and how you want to control your camera and any shooting settings whilst using your smartphone. Transfer remote, so if you're transferring files or videos from your camera to your computer, for any connections like that, you've got file transfer here. And you can have this on off, your connection method, whether it's Wi-Fi or USB, and then in the PC remote function you can say whether it needs to be on, off, and then whether you're doing it through USB cable or through Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi access point, which is where you'll be using WPS, and then Bluetooth on or off, which is quite handy if you're using a remote controller, for example. Just bear in mind if you're leaving that on, it will use up a little extra battery power. Then for live streaming, you can come in here and you can live stream and you could be recording at the same time. And you can choose in here the frame rate. You can choose the frame rate and the outputs. You can have it at 4K, 1080p, 720, whatever is your preference. And then we drop down to Wi-Fi, and then we can connect this camera to the Wi-Fi, which hopefully you've probably done by now, but otherwise you can use your WPS on your access point. You can search for your access, or you can display the info here, and so you can see exactly what your Wi-Fi settings are, and then your Bluetooth function here. So for pairing the camera, you've got all your functions there, and you can manage your paired devices. So you'll say, for example, I've got my mobile phone in here, wired LAN, which is not a setting I'm really using, and then network option. If you have it in airplane mode, want to edit your device name, etc., you can do it here, so that on a network your camera will show up as your company name or A7RV, whatever you choose. Dropping down to the bottom, we've got the setup menu, and in here is where you would be setting up the date, the time, where you can reset all your settings, and then operation customize, which I've covered in a previous video again, for customizing all the buttons. I suggest, rather than me taking up time going into that now, that you check out that other video. But just to quickly show you, you've got your camera icon here, and then you can access all the buttons. So that would be the AEL button, and you can click in here, change whatever you want that button to do when you click it. And you can work through all your custom buttons there. And then if you're in video mode, you can do the same there, and in playback mode, you can do the same. You can make all the buttons do something completely different. And this is where you change anything on your function menu for video or camera, again covered in the previous video. And then your dial customization, so if you want to customize these dials on the top and on the back, you can do them from this menu here, and you can set up my dial, so these do different functions. I've left them as standard. Touch operations, so with the touch screen, whether it is on or off and what you actually want it to do, you can change the sensitivity of that, and all those settings you could be using here, and it will give you more functions like a mobile phone with your swiping. Finder monitor is handy because you might want to lock whether you're using the viewfinder or the screen, depending if you're using photography or for video, so they're not cover this switching the screen on and off. So on auto, when you cover the eyepiece, then the screen will cut off because it thinks you've taken the camera up to your eye. So sometimes that could be really handy. And then you can just change what's happening with your monitor, the brightness, and change the brightness of the viewfinder, and whether you want to mess with the color temperature of all of that and the quality of the viewfinder and monitor. Display options can be handy because if you're shooting in S-Log2, S-Log3, it's very flat profile, you don't want to see that on your LCD monitor, so you can drop down to, for example, Gamma Display Assist. If you've got that on, then it'll give you a more real view of what you're seeing, so it's not just this grey flat image. So it'll help you while you're actually filming. And then power saving settings and your sound settings, USB connection mode here. You can make adjustments there, and whether you want the USB to be used as a power supply or not. And your external output is for when you're connecting to a monitor and what the HDMI display will do, whether it's on resolution is auto, or whether you want to tell it to be 1080p or 4K, and whether you want it to display the information or not. And then setup options for linking video lights and whether they need to be powered or not. Anti-dust, auto pixel mapping, and pixel mapping we'll cover in another video because that's a little more complicated. And then the version of software that you've got and any privacy notices. So that's really the basic run through of all your camera settings there. Just note also, of course, that all this is touch sensitive, and unless you've got it turned off, so you can use this like you would a mobile phone, which is a lovely new feature they've added to this camera just to give it the extra wow factor. There you have it, there's a lot in this menu. I hope you found that useful and you're now more accustomed to going through all the settings here. There's some areas, of course, we moved over a little quicker, like color space and all the auto focus and face recognition, because we'll go into those in much more detail and give real life examples of how they work. So if you have any questions or you've got some knowledge to add, please drop them in the comments. If you subscribe to the channel, let us know so I can personally thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.